Welcome back to our series on creating complex marketplace deployments using our commercial marketplace offer deployment manager. In this particular video, we're going to cover the installation experience after you've successfully published an offer to the Azure Marketplace using the packaging that we've created with our modem tool. You're going to your customers are going to be able to actually install these like they would any other marketplace deployment. We just wanted to walk you through what that process actually looked like and what slight additions there's going to be, as well as covering the user interface experience that will be presented to the user once the installation is kicked off. So if you recall, we created a package and uploaded it and published it under the offer name Complex Terraform. So what we should see is that should be available like any other solution in the Azure portal. So if I go and I say create a resource and I search for complex, what we're going to see is that complex Terraform is now available for my installation. So I'm simply going to click on that. And if you remember back from the video that we had in the series on the builder or packaging, um, I walked you through how once we do the build command, if you were to expand the app.zip that got created and ultimately was handed over as a technical configuration, we actually unzipped the installer.zip that was inside of the app.zip. And inside that was the create UI definition that we altered. And there was a couple of steps that were created. What you're going to see is as we go through, there is this step, this app installer settings that we can see right here. That is actually what we injected into the installation experience that you as the publisher created initially. So this is what was getting added. So for my purposes, I'm just going to install in a new resource group. I'm going to call this like Bob Jack Complex 20. And I'm going to choose the East US. And now this was a password that was part of the Terraform template that we were using, the complex Terraform template. Basically, AKA, this is the initial create UI definition that you as a publisher asked to capture. So this is not our installer. This is the standard create UI definition that was used as the source of the build command. It was asking for a password that was going to find its way into a SQL Server user that was part of the solution. So I'm just going to give it a password, and I'm going to confirm that. And I'm going to move next. Now, this is what we actually injected into the installation experience. And we require a couple of pieces of information. The first is you can select whether or not our installer will auto-delete in 24 hours. The user interface will allow you to execute a command to delete the installer on demand, but up front you can say, once we're going to assume that the installation is complete, 24 hours later, our installer is going to be deleted and all the resources that our installer needs, which would be our managed, our virtual machine offer, some networking components, some storage, anything that we use for the installation. By clicking this checkbox, it'll automatically be deleted in 24 hours. This will not affect anything that is part of your solution. This will only delete what's required for the installer. It's also going to ask me for a password, and this password is used for our front-end user interface experience. You're going to be presented with a installation or an admin user in a login box. You're going to provide this password. This will allow you to log into the installer's front-end experience. So I'm just going to click next, and then I'm going to click Create, and this will take a few minutes to install. So we're just going to take a break, and then I will revisit back here once the installation is complete. Okay, so it says our deployment is complete. Now, depending on your solution, it can take, quite a bit of time for the actual installation to complete. So just be aware of when it claims that your deployment is complete here. You'll see that the green check mark is reached. And you can dig into the deployment details, and that should tell you the various resources that were installed. In our particular case, we're looking for a number of resources here are going to be maintained by the installer. So for instance, our modem virtual machine, this is the VM offer that's actually doing the install. You're also going to want to look for a user interface site, and you can find that in the input here of the deployment. You're going to see this application installer URL, and this application installer URL is going to be the front end experience for your particular install. Now, it can take a good bit of time for this to fire up. So all I'm going to do is copy that, and I'm going to paste this into another tab, and I'm going to fire this up. Now I can see the spinny wheel spinning, so we're now in the process of starting to launch the installer, and this can take a couple of minutes to get the user interface up and running. So a little bit of patience is required here, but after a couple of minutes, it'll pop up. Okay, so our front end is loaded, and it's going to ask for a username and password. So for our purposes, our username is going to be admin, and we can find that here in our inputs under application username. And we're going to enter the password that we collected in the installer step of the installation experience. So I'm going to add that right now. And after we log in, we're going to see that it recognizes that a deployment was pending and it was in progress. And in our case, it has already succeeded. It executed quite quickly because we had a pretty small sample. Inside the experience, what you're going to see is that there were 14 resources that were successfully installed. We're actually filtering out all of the resources that are related to the installation experience. So if I were to go back to my resource group, so if you recall, I created the resource group Bob Jack Complex. This isn't necessarily going to be a matched one-to-one of what we're going to see inside the installer. Our installer is going to have a subset of what is in the resource group itself because of that filtering. If there were any failures, you're going to be able to filter on that by just clicking this failures box here. And on top of that, you're going to be able to click this diagnostics tab, and that's going to call into our backend API, which will display the output of the Terraform installer that's running inside of our virtual machine. And it's just going to be a standard output of what you would be typically seeing when you're running a Terraform installation. So if we just scroll down here, we're going to ultimately see all of the resources that were executed. We'll see a log on the state file that was created. And if we find our way down towards the bottom, we're going to see that this was successfully completed with 14 resources that were added. Once again, if there are any issues with your installation packaging, this is where you would look for diagnostics and help with your debugging. So the last thing I would say is that if you do want to execute a delete of in real time, we had set it to automatically delete in 24 hours, but there is a delete command here which you can execute. So that's all that we have here for this entry in our series here on actually kicking off an install. So we'll catch you in the next video for a wrap up.